It's September the 14th, 2011. This is 508, a show about Worcester. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Benedetti, and today on the show we have school committee member Tracy Novick. Tracy, how's it going?
It's going well, Mike. How are you?
I am doing fine. It's a lovely deer.
Thank you.
So I want to explain to people what's going on. On this show, which is a show about Worcester, for the last couple of months, we've been talking to people running for city council, and we've been asking them questions from a list of the important issues for city council, and we've not been talking to people about school committee. And we're not really going to follow up at all on school committee, but Tracy has been a panelist on this show since back when there was actually a panel on this show every week, and since was elected to the school committee and is running for re-election. And so I want to talk to you about the school committee stuff, Tracy. I enjoy the city council. I know that it's something I should...
It's riveting theater.
I should probably be in treatment for being an adult who's interested in the Worcester City Council, but I am interested in the Worcester City Council.
I think it's more like AA, where there's actually like a support group.
Yes. But the school committee, on the other hand, is just like public schools. I'm just like, oh please. But they're important. They're a huge amount of the city budget.
They are. We send 24,000 children to them every day.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, most people in Worcester, like, if they have any interaction with the city government, that's...
Sure.
They spend years of their life interaction with that part of the city government.
Sure. You're entrusting children to them for much of their day.
Yeah. So I guess I want to ask you a little bit about issues and a little bit about your candidacy. Anyway, in case the introduction was not clear, this is going to be a very biased interview, as it is every year that we talk to Tracy on the show. I have no shame about that. I don't care. Tracy, what have you? Now, you followed education in the school committee very closely before you were elected.
Yes.
How does the experience compare? What did you learn actually now that you've been on the school committee?
That where you are in life and your perspective really informs how you make decisions on the school committee.
Okay.
So, what's important and what do you need to be pushing and all of those kinds of things. It matters that I taught, and so that, like, when they come forward with a policy, my first question is, did anyone ask a teacher? And there's always these sort of, it bothers me when there's all these blank stares, like, oh, why would we have asked a teacher? And I'm like, because they're the ones who are going to actually get stuck with this at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. You're a parent, so you're saying, it matters that we have 30 minutes of recess in the elementary school grades. It matters that, what have you, that kids can actually reach the sinks in the bathroom, those kinds of things. And so I've been finding that a lot of when something comes before the committee and how I tackle it may be different than some of my colleagues because of my having been a teacher and my having children.
Right. And it's, you're an interesting figure, I feel like, in Worcester politics, because you actually taken strong, consistent positions on things. Which people take strong positions on things, but they don't necessarily come from like a philosophical thing. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, and the other thing, I mean, this is something that I hoped that I would do, and I guess that I have done, which is that you don't make decisions based on what's going to get you votes. You don't make decisions based on what's popular. You make decisions based on the information you have and what's the right thing to do, which seems... I mean, it seems to me...
We'll see how well that works out as a strategy in a couple of months. I think that this will be an interesting experiment in some ways. I mean, to me, it would have been a giant waste of time to be on this and just kind of try to surf the wave or whatever it is that people do. And I'm probably not very good at that anyway. I'm far too blunt and so forth. So yeah, we're going to see how that works out in terms of an election strategy. Because I haven't really been focusing on an election strategy. I've been trying to do my job. It's interesting because whenever you were running in this previous school committee election, there were two criticisms that I heard about you very strongly. One of them was it was in reaction to the fact that a lot of people liked you because you were like a blogger. Because you were always writing. You were a great environmental blog, but you were always writing these things like every day about education and school policy in Worcester, and again, like all these sort of policy-oriented stuff. You're always writing about the school committee. You're writing all kinds of great stuff. And we're lucky in Worcester because you were writing all this stuff, and also Jackie Reese at the Telegram, one of the best reporters,
and she's
writing
a good reporter.
Fantastic stuff about schools in Worcester. People were saying, well, you guys think this is so cool now that you have like this person who's like being all transparent and whatever. It's not going to continue going forward. This is actually like, good job, thumbs up. You've continued that. The other thing that people said was like, well, why do we even care? What does it matter that she's on the school committee or not? And that's where I think the fact that you've come out, I'm trying to think of all the controversial things that you have done. Like, you come out, you've been very consistent in sort of being skeptical of school privatization and increase in charter schools. You've been You've done things like you voted against, I guess I would describe it as like increased federal control of our schools in some cases in exchange
Thus
for
turning
money.
down millions of dollars in federal aid.
Yes. And yeah, of course, you whenever there was this test cheating scandal, what was it, a year ago?
Yeah.
You were one of the outspoken minority on the school committee who said we want to do our own investigation and get to the bottom of this.
Was just speaking with the public records attorney this morning about that. Actually,
there you go.
We've objected to the city's decision and are continuing to pursue that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so it's interesting that I don't know. Like I sort of feel like whenever people are asking me about you as running, I'm just like I feel like it's very helpful to have Tracy on the school committee. In a similar way that it's helpful to have like Connie on the city council. Connie has not been as much of a contrarian as she could be these past couple of years, but Connie Lukes on the city council is always one who's willing to stand up on an issue where all the other councilors seem kind of agreed and say, "You guys are all idiots." And you're not a contrarian in that way, but I mean, like Connie adds that perspective to the council. You add a certain perspective to the school committee.
Sure, I mean, you want to make sure the whole point in having a body of multiple people is to have a multiplicity of perspectives, which means that once in a while you need somebody who stands up and says, "Hey, wait a minute, what are we doing? Or why are we doing this? Or what was the argument? Or where's the research? Or where's the data? Or where's the money going? Or that kind of stuff."
Yeah. So what's going on these days? Because like I said, I try not to pay attention at all to the Worcester Public Schools.
Well, if you pay attention to city council, though, you've actually been paying attention to what has now sort of overtaken our campaign, even though we didn't actually think this was an issue.
This is this thing where the city council, I mean, what did they end up deciding? They ended up deciding that they would
it's
like
going
to
on
see,
the ballot.
they would like their, so the city council has said that Worcester voters should, on the ballot, be able to basically express a preference, nothing binding, but express a preference about whether or not we should have district school committee members as well as at-large. Like right now in the city council, we've got a bunch of at-large councilors that everybody votes for those seats, and then every district of the city has a city councilor. And this would be a similar thing with the school committee, thus expanding the size of the school committee.
Yes, doubling.
Thus costing money to pay.
$100,000.
$100,000 a year?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty okay.
Particularly if anybody takes any benefits, like we are eligible for health insurance and so forth. It would be 88 or something like that just in salary.
Oh, okay. And so, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can see that you can make arguments about this would sort of change things. There'd be representation on a neighborhood level and whatever. The interesting thing is, of course, is that we have this at the city council, and we haven't always had this on the city council. We've had it on the city council for 26 years. And that was one of the arguments for doing that, or that was one of the things people hope would happen. And of course, none of these things happen. There's not like this, there's essentially no minorities on the city council. There have, occasionally been some, but it hasn't. They've not come from the district councilors, but from the at-large councilors. So it's interesting because it's like I feel like you can make an argument either way, but then you can also like look at the track record and say, this actually hasn't worked on the city. In fact, it hasn't worked on the city council so strongly that there's this huge push always to have neighborhood councils, to try to have something even more than district councilors, because the district councilors themselves, I think people feel, haven't really rocked us like they need to rock us.
Right, and some of them occasionally forget parts of their district. Right.
People feel neglected.
Right. Yes. And where are the edges or what sections are.
Right.
Yes.
Is there any? So on the other hand, it's not like things making sense. It's not like Worcester politics is based on things making sense, right? You know what I'm saying?
Well, actually, this is what I thought was most just spellbinding, I guess, about this whole thing, is that whether you look at the city council and the sort of things that come before them, or you look at the school committee and like national ed policy coming before us, everybody seems to always be proposing these solutions to things that everybody acknowledges are in some way a problem, that when you actually look at them are not solutions. Like, that we tried this X place and it turns out that totally didn't work at all and was a waste of money or whatever.
But it's something.
But we're doing something, and something is happening, and isn't this great and exciting? Something needs to be done.
This is something. Let's do this.
And that's what I feel like this is. Like, it's an election year, and some of the counselors were, I don't know, bored or not facing enough challengers or something.
They're just mad at you guys. They want to start a gang war.
Like, what have we done? Oh my God! Well, it was ridiculous. I mean, so we went to council. 4 of us were. There was a quorum of the school committee at city council on Tuesday, and some of them were actually really angry about the fact that we were there saying. So speaking as someone who's actually on school committee, and the other thing I'd say is that those of us who are on school committee, nobody feels threatened by this. I mean, it's not like any of us say are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my seat or something like that.
Right.
we're actually trying to weigh this on the merits of what we know of the Worcester School Committee and the Worcester Public Schools.
There would be additional seats. It's not like, right?
Well, although the next city councilor who pats me on the shoulder and tells me that I'd make a great district school committee member, I mean, could you tell me that you don't think I'm doing my job any more strongly? I mean, I work really hard. I don't make phone calls about my own children's schools on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Okay.
I will only make a phone call about one of my children's schools if I hear from another parent. I spend more time in other schools than I do my own children's schools. Like, and Mary Mullaney, I think, had probably one of the more compelling arguments. She's been on the school committee for 18 years. She went through the list of where the new schools have been built. Not a single one of them in the last 18 years has been built on the west side of Worcester, which usually the argument is the west side is overrepresented.
Right.
Well, where are we spending the money? Where are we investing in capital? Where, where it was needed.
Right.
When we went to spend, we got additional capital funds from the city this year. When we went to spend it, we went to administration and we said, okay, so what do we need to do first? What's most important? What's most compelling? Not my child, school needs new windows.
Yeah.
You can't run the school system that way.
Let me ask you this, Tracy. Other than this being, other than this costing more money, both for salaries and for just making the electoral process a little more complicated, is there any reason not to do it?
Yeah, because I think it actually really would hang things up. I mean, you're going around as I am, and seeing where they're fixing sidewalks and where they're fixing streets. And great fan of fixing sidewalks and fixing streets. That's fabulous. But are they doing it in the places that are most needed? Or no, what they did was they split the budget 5 ways, and they said we're going to spend a fifth of each district.
Okay.
Well, maybe District 3 needed more. That's the way we do it on the school side. We say, okay, who needs the most? We don't actually count. We made sure that we spent as much over here as we did over there.
So having district school committee members just means that things are split. That things would tend to become split along district lines, even when it doesn't make sense.
Sure, it would be horse trading.
Okay.
And also, we have responsibilities that the city council doesn't, and this is when you're going to get bored. But we hire and fire a whole bunch of administrators. We have to set policy for the entire system. We actually have general superintendency duties.
Mm-hmm.
There's administrative oversight that we're actually compelled to do. I have heard it said by people who work for the city that the school committee has greater powers within the Worcester Public Schools than the city council has within the city.
Okay.
Which is not a popular statement on the city side, but it's nonetheless probably true. We need everybody to always have a district perspective, have a district-wide perspective,
Okay.
to be looking at the entirety of the city with every decision that we make. You can't actually really be saying, well, which business administrator would be best for District 3, or that you can't. You have to say what's going to be best for the entire system,
Okay.
and that bothers me a lot to try to say we're going to chop things up and that's going to make it better. And I mean, you had the best argument of all, which was Nick Kostopoulos' column in the TNG on Sunday, which was great. So after 26 years, the city council has done this, hasn't had any effect. Still got white men over the age of 50, largely.
Sure.
So yes, let's do that to school committee. That'd be great. That would definitely change radically the makeup of the school committee. No, and plus we actually have. I mean, they haven't followed Section 8 of the charter and done neighborhood councils. Under ed reform, we have site councils at every school.
Okay.
Elected by parents and teachers and community members. We have a citywide parent advisory group which has membership from every Cindy school. We send stuff there from the school committee to say, hey, parents, what do you think? They actually are a Congress. They have one from every single school. They actually have representation. And, the administration sends stuff there. We send stuff there. They send stuff to us.
So there's already stuff
is.
on a school by school basis in a region. Is there
in a
district?
citywide basis.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is one where I feel like some of this proposal is out of just lack of knowledge on the council side in terms of how we actually function and what we actually have, which is unfortunate, but that's kind of what happens when you go dabbling in other people's business.
I think I think that they just think it's exciting. Maybe they just enjoy it. They're like, you know what? We've enjoyed district council. It's so fun. You guys are going to love it.
Some of the district councilors were the ones who were most adamant that this was a fabulous idea. And although I have to give our own district councilor, Bill Eddy, credit, he was one of the 3 votes against this. It was entirely based on the notion that if we are calling for a charter change, it should be called for by the greater populace, not for by the city council. He made some very compelling arguments, and he did a very good job.
This also isn't any. I mean, this vote is this is a suggestion, but this is also This is, I mean, this vote would be a suggestion. This
well,
citywide
if
vote.
it passes, then they go forward with what would be the charter change. So they have to then hold hearings and appoint a charter
Do they have to?
commission. Well,
Can they just sort of forget about it because it's?
they could, but we'd have to have a radically different makeup of the city council because I mean they got the 8 votes.
Are they excited about it though?
Oh, they were just.
Will
You weren't
they-
watching council on Tuesday, were you?
No, I didn't. I mean, I can't. Maybe again, I'm just putting my own bias on this. I can't imagine anybody would be excited about school doing anything to the school committee, and definitely not for more than like a day. Like, is it possible that they were just really revved up for like a couple of hours?
Oh no,
and then
they've
like
been talking about
come
this
December
since...
they'll be like, oh whatever, I don't care about that
there
anymore.
are a couple of members who definitely are there. Like I would say that Mike Germain was like, okay, you want to talk about this? That's fine. Which I mean, you can totally see Mike
Why
Germain
not let
doing.
people vote for it?
People want to talk about
People
this.
love voting.
That's
Put
great.
it on there.
People voted. But yeah, a couple of them are very like vigorous. Yeah. I mean, Phil Palmieri is absolutely convinced that we would have had North High School 20 years ago if there'd been a district counselor.
I love this argument about North High that somehow.
Well, it ignores the reality that first of all, the city council is the one that funds schools.
Yeah.
And it also ignores the reality that the other school that we had to build in the last 20 years was a new vocational school, which everyone might imagine was highly controversial and also desperately needed.
Mm-hmm.
And the state will only fund one new school building in a city at a time. We chose to do tech first, and then we went for North. It's not like,
I don't know.
not like we were ignoring things. It was that there were a couple of urgent things that needed to be done. And
Well-
now we need to fix Nelson Place, which is literally falling down. But
Now I know why. Now I know why the city council brought this up, because this is actually kind of fun to talk about, and it
See?
involves the school committee. Because now I feel like I have to say,
maybe
okay,
they thought
let's
that
talk
we needed
about
something exciting.
let's talk about things. So $100,000 a year is real money, but it's also real money in a massive school budget. Like, let's talk about what else is going on that's like an actual real thing besides the district.
Well, we actually went out and we actually fixed a whole bunch of schools. I mean, we're getting a report on the opening of school tomorrow night at the school committee meeting.
Okay.
And one of the things we did was that there's a review school by school of what we fixed over the summer because we got actual extra capital money this year from the city council. So
Okay.
putting new science labs in Worcester East Middle, tearing up the old carpeting at South.
Okay.
There's a bunch of stuff like that. And also smaller stuff like, making bathrooms not look completely atrocious. I actually got stopped at the parish picnic on Sunday by somebody who'd been in the Doherty locker room and was like, it's fabulous now! Oh my gosh! They fixed it, Mrs. Novick! Yeah, stuff like that, which makes people feel better about where they are. And also the kids at Doherty apparently are really entertained by the fact that we improved the student bathrooms but not the faculty bathrooms.
Oh.
The kids think this is fabulous.
Yeah.
Student bathrooms probably needed it more.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, so there was a bunch of that was going over the summer, which is great because we haven't been able to do that. We're probably, a long time behind in that kind of work. We
Yeah.
mostly have been doing, emergency boiler replacements that nobody really gets excited about but need to be done.
Yeah.
We actually got to do stuff that shows now. That's cool.
I want to ask you about. I want to ask you another school's question again, sort of showing my ignorance / total lack of interest.
Well, that's why this works.
This is right, because there's one person who's like super knowledgeable and super passionate, and one person who's just sort of
Trying desperately to stay awake.
I'm just trying to. I am kind of tired.
I'm trying to stay.
I did a lot of running today, and my blood sugar is being weird. How are the Worcester schools doing? Like and I should say, does it even make sense? Is there so much variation between schools that it's like they're all over the place, or do you feel like you can make generalizations about the
Academically?
district? Yeah, I mean, what else is going on besides academics at these schools?
We put in 2 new playgrounds over the summer, and we're going to put in a third on the 24th of September
But I mean,
at Union Hill.
But I mean, though, at the end of the day, the schools are about teaching kids stuff,
Yeah,
right?
well, so there's a couple of things. The innovation schools were this sort of big splash in the spring,
Yeah.
and a couple of those actually are doing some interesting things. So Chandler Magnet started a K and 1 dual language program,
Okay.
which is total immersion in English and Spanish
Mm-hmm.
for kids who are primarily one speaker of one or the other.
Okay.
Which is, something we ought to be doing with the number of Spanish speakers we have in the district anyway. We already were doing it at Norback and at Roosevelt. They were oversubscribed. Chandler Magnet had a primarily Spanish-speaking population already going.
So this is a thing where if you grew up speaking Spanish, you would be just total immersion in.
No, they spend
English.
half the day in each. So they
really?
cover the same material in both classes. So you get the material in whatever your first language is, and then you switch and get it in your second language.
So this is so if you're an English speaking kid, this would be like an awesome chance to learn Spanish, like when your brain is actually really good at learning
I have a kindergartner
language.
who's coming off the bus going, Elefante! Yes.
Okay, so that sounds kind of cool.
That is kind of cool. And and it's one of those things where something that some districts see as being an obstacle to be overcome, native
Yeah.
Spanish speaking, is actually being used as a benefit for the district instead. Which is cool.
Do we know how that's going? I mean, has it been going on long enough to have any?
At the other two schools, it's been going really, really well. And one
Okay.
thing that's sort of a side effect that nobody thought of is that the native Spanish speakers end up doing better academically than their peers in other schools because they don't lose their academic confidence the same way that some other kids do who are just doing English.
Huh.
Because they know something that the other kids don't know.
Yeah.
That's seen as valuable in the school. Which I had never thought of, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about it.
Yeah.
That if everybody, some of your peers are having to learn something that you already know,
Yeah.
hey, maybe you can do the school thing after all, which is cool.
Cool. What else is going? But I just want to get back to my question of like overall.
Academically.
Can you judge this? Can you judge the district as a whole, or
You
is it all over
still-
the place?
You still see the same ties that you see everywhere, which is if all you look at is the MCAS scores, there's a tie to poverty.
Okay.
So if you have the poverty level of the school and the MCAS scores of the school, not everywhere, but most of the places, the two things are in some ways comparable.
The poorer the student body, the worse the score.
The MCAS scores.
Okay.
And the more they have to overcome. And I mean, that goes back to everything from like prenatal nutrition to all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And that's a conversation that nationally we need to be having, and we're not.
Okay.
The schools, I think, do the best they can with it, doing everything from actually feeding kids breakfast and lunch and after-school snacks and that kind of stuff, to trying to make sure that they're immersed in reading and that kind of stuff.
Right.
The challenge there is to make sure that you're not only focusing on the test scores, but actually you're focusing on the academics.
Yeah. Okay. So would you say? I mean, so how would you judge the Worcester schools overall?
I think that for an urban district with the challenges we have, we do an amazing job on a daily basis.
Okay. And you're not a big MCAS fan.
I never have been.
So you don't look at MCAS scores when you're saying, is this?
They went up. I got an email from the state. Was it last week when they released the statewide scores, and they were trying to say that one of the subsections had gone up by 1 percentage point, and I was like, okay, so now we've reached new levels of absurdity. So it went up 1 percentage point, and everybody cheers, and it goes down 1 percentage point, and everybody. I mean, it's ridiculous, and you're still comparing last year's fifth graders to this year's fifth graders, and all of the rest of this nonsense that, I mean, part of the report tomorrow night is going to do AYP again, which everybody keeps saying we need to throw out the window because adequate yearly progress is exactly what's going to make 60% of our schools look like they're failing, according to the Secretary of Education. So, yeah, this is a messed up system.
How do you, so if MCAS scores aren't what you would like to look at to say, is the school doing well, what do you look at when you just think of the school's doing well?
There's a couple of things. First of all, I look at what happens to those kids over time. Where do they end up? And
Okay.
and not they're making multi-million dollars, because that's not my value system.
Okay.
But are they prepared to be an active and engaged citizen? Can they, read the newspaper, evaluate voting decisions, be engaged in local civic life, those kinds of things, earn a living, raise a family, those kinds of things. The other thing, sort of reeling it back more, that I look at is, are kids actively engaged in learning, and are they enthusiastic about being there? Because that's one of the things that I think we dangerously can sacrifice if we turn this too much into drill and kill, is most kids like to learn, at least at first. And the danger is that school can kill that.
Yes.
And making sure that, science is actually about doing stuff. Reading is about engaging in stories.
Yeah.
Math is about figuring things out. Keep making sure that you keep those kinds of principles, and that joy and that energy is something that I think is hugely important. And that's something that I think you can judge simply by walking through a building. That you can tell in classrooms what's the energy level, how are kids being treated, how are kids interacting, how are they interacting with a teacher.
Yeah.
Those kind of things I think are huge.
Is that something that you feel like as a school committee, that the school committee has impact on though?
I think so, because we set policy and set direction, and sort of creating a value system for the district then has an impact on the schools. And that's something that I've been frustrated with, certainly in Massachusetts, but with the Worcester district, in terms of it being MAP scores, MCAS scores, that kind of thing, and data walls, and here's how many points that so-and-so went up. But there are schools that in some ways are making small gestures of rebellion, or are centering themselves in other value systems. And you can see that with what's going on in the building, that the little rocket ship that's going up doesn't have a MAP score on it. It says, I want to learn how to do division better this year, or I want to be better at dribbling a basketball. Those kinds of things are what the kids are actually prioritizing and putting value on.
Awesome. Cool. I feel like 25 minutes of the school committee is all I can handle. I'm sorry about that.
Mike, you'd never make it through our meetings.
I never have seen a school committee meeting, ever. I stay far away. City council meetings I can see sometimes. I don't know. Well, Tracy, thanks for being on the show. Good luck in the election.
Thank you.
Actually, I can ask you a totally. Oh no! Oh, I totally got some good questions for you now.
Oh, good.
Have you seen The Wire?
I was gonna say, are you gonna ask me these questions about The Wire and bench pressing, because I'm gonna fail those utterly.
You haven't seen The Wire?
Mm-mm.
Do you know how much you can bench?
Probably very little.
You seriously don't know how much you can bench?
No, I do not know how much I can
Alright.
bench. I know that I can carry a 5-year-old. I know that I can carry the innovation plans of 5 schools all at the same time. I regularly carry my netbook for long distances of time.
Okay.
And I can run in 3-inch heels. You know, I mean, what do you want?
That's pretty good. That could be the alternative thing.
There you go. A race.
Well, Tracy, thanks for being on the show. I hope you enjoy the rest of the election campaign. We should mention that the preliminary election is coming
That's
up
right.
on the September the 20th. There's no school committee and stuff on that, right?
No, we only have 10 running for 6 seats.
Oh, okay. So
at-large prelim and 1 and 3.
Yeah. So right. So just to recap, it's not a primary election, because primary is like sort of when you're sifting out who's the most popular candidate of each political party to go into the general election. And this is a preliminary election where we have a ton of at-large city councilors, and there's a couple of the district races that have more than 2 people running. And so they sort of want to sift out the weaker candidates, the least popular candidates. So that's what the preliminary is all about. It's September the 20th. I should mention, 2 election cycles ago, there was a preliminary election.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when Grace Ross was running at-large in the city council. And she did very, very well in the preliminary election. She was a very, very strong candidate. And then when it came to between the preliminary and the general election, there was a lot of controversy around positions that the Massachusetts Green Rainbow Party had taken when she was on their state committee. And she finished. She didn't end up getting on the city council. She had a much weaker ranking in the general election than the preliminary. So stuff can happen in between. I don't want to spend too much time on the horse race, but stuff can happen in between. New candidates, even if you win that preliminary, you got to keep rocking. You got to keep working hard, and voters, you can't just say, oh, well, now we know who it's going to be, because you don't know.
You never know.
You never know. Tracy, good luck.
Thank you.
Everyone at home, good luck to you too, and we'll see you next week.